The hard, polished mahogany door clicked shut behind me, the sound echoing the finality that was about to descend upon my life. I sat on a stiff leather chair that felt as cold and unforgiving as the two people sitting opposite me, my brother Mark and my sister Lisa. Mark was checking his reflection in the dark screen of his phone, adjusting the knot of his silk tie. Lisa was dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue, a performance of grief she had perfected over the years. We were in a lawyer's office, a place that smelled of old paper and new money, to hear the last will and testament of my mother, Eleanor. The lawyer, a man named Mr. Abernathy, with a face like a tired bloodhound, cleared his throat. He unfolded a document with a crisp rustle that made my stomach clench. "We are gathered here to read the final will of Eleanor Jean Vance," he began, his voice a low monotone. He droned on through the legal jargon, the formal declarations that felt so detached from the warm, vibrant woman my mother had once been. I braced myself. I wasn't expecting much. After the last 5 years, I had learned to expect nothing from my family, but I still wasn't prepared for what came next. "Regarding my primary asset," Mr. Abernathy read, looking over his spectacles, "the property located at 457 Maple Drive, along with all its contents and my remaining financial accounts, I bequeath everything, in its entirety, to be divided equally between my beloved son, Mark Vance, and my beloved daughter, Lisa Kerrigan." He paused, shuffling the papers. I waited. Surely there was a mention of me, a token, a piece of jewelry, a photograph, a thank you. Mr. Abernathy looked up first at Mark and Lisa, then at me, a flicker of something unreadable, pity perhaps, in his eyes. "This concludes the reading of the will." The air left my lungs in a silent rush. Nothing. I got nothing. 5 years of my life, sacrificed, my career, my savings, my youth, all poured into caring for a woman who in the end had erased me completely. Mark's lips curve into a subtle, triumphant smirk. Lisa let out a small, performative sob, which I now understood was relief, not sorrow. I wasn't just disinherited, I was invalidated. I was a ghost in my own family's history, and they were the ones holding the eraser. It felt like I'd been erased from my own life. If you have ever felt betrayed by the people who should have been your biggest supporters, the ones who were supposed to love you unconditionally, then you know a fraction of the cold emptiness that flooded my veins in that moment. It's a unique kind of pain. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments below, and if this feeling is at all familiar to you, please like this video and subscribe to join a community of people who understand what it's like to be taken for granted. To understand how I ended up in that cold, sterile office, a non-entity in my own mother's final story, we have to go back 5 years. Back to the phone call that changed everything. 5 years earlier, I was happy. Or at least I was content. I was 32, working as a freelance graphic designer from my small but sunny apartment in the city. I had a good roster of clients, a circle of close friends, and a life that was my own. My relationship with my family was what it had always been, distant but functional. I was the middle child, the quiet, responsible one. Mark, 5 years my senior, was the golden boy. He was a vice president at some faceless corporation with a corner office, a flashy car, and a wife that looked like she was assembled from a catalog of expensive trends. He lived 3 states away and graced us with his presence twice a year at Thanksgiving and Christmas, where he would regale us with tales of his success and hand out gift cards as if bestowing royal favors. Lisa, 2 years my junior, was the drama queen. Her life was a perpetual whirlwind of crises, bad breakups, terrible bosses, financial emergencies. She lived an hour away, and her calls were always frantic, always needing something. A shoulder to cry on, a loan to cover her rent, a babysitter for her 2 kids so she could have a mental health day. And me, I was the anchor, the reliable one. I was the one who remembered birthdays, the one who called mom every Sunday, the one who drove over to help her with her garden or fix her computer. I never asked for anything, so in return, I was never really given anything. I was just there, a dependable piece of the family furniture. The phone call came on a Tuesday.
It was Lisa, of course, her voice shrill with panic. "You need to get to the hospital. It's Mom."
My blood ran cold. I dropped everything, grabbed my keys, and broke every speed limit to get to the emergency room. I found Mom in a curtained-off cubicle, looking small and pale in a hospital gown. She had taken a fall down the stairs. A broken hip. The doctor said she was lucky it wasn't worse, but at 74, a broken hip was a life-altering event. Mark flew in the next day, all bluster and feigned authority. He cornered the doctors, demanding answers, his voice echoing in the quiet hallway. Lisa fluttered around, wringing her hands and complaining about how the hospital smell gave her a headache. I was the one who sat by Mom's bed, holding her hand, helping her sip water, and reassuring her that everything would be okay, even though I had no idea how. After a week, the hospital was ready to discharge her. That's when the family meeting happened, in the bleak hospital cafeteria that smelled of disinfectant and burnt coffee. "Well, she can't live alone anymore," Mark declared, stirring his coffee with a plastic stick. "It's not safe." "I can't take her," Lisa said immediately, her eyes wide. "My apartment is tiny. The kids are so loud, she wouldn't get any rest. And my anxiety, I just can't handle the stress." They both turned to look at me. It was a slow, deliberate turning of heads, as if it had been choreographed. "What?" I asked, though I already knew what was coming. "You work from home, right?" Mark said, his tone casual, as if he were suggesting I switch internet providers. "It makes the most sense for you to take the lead on this. You're the most flexible." "Take the lead? What does that even mean, Mark?" "It means she can live with you, or you can move back into the house with her. The family home is big enough. It's perfect." A wave of dizziness washed over me. Move back home? To my childhood bedroom? Give up my apartment, my independence, my life? I have a life here, Mark. I have clients. "You can do your design stuff from anywhere," he waved a dismissive hand. "We'll help, of course. We'll chip in." "Absolutely," Lisa chimed in, looking relieved. "We'll send money every month. We'll be a team. Team Vance." They painted a beautiful picture, a collaborative effort. I would provide the hands-on care, and they would provide the financial and emotional support. I would be the field commander, and they would be my loyal supply lines. I looked at my mother, who had been silent through all of this, just staring into her cup of lukewarm tea. "Mom, what do you want?" She looked up, her eyes pleading. "I don't want to go to a home, sweetheart. Please, I just want to be in my own house." Her words were the final nail in the coffin of my old life. How could I say no to that? How could I be the child who sent her mother to a nursing home when my siblings stood there promising a team effort? So I agreed. I was a fool. I was naive. But I loved my mother, and I truly believed that for once my family would pull together. The first 6 months were a blur of logistics and sacrifice. I gave up my beautiful apartment, putting my furniture in storage and moving into my teenage bedroom at my mother's house. The room felt alien, decorated with faded posters of bands I no longer listened to, and trophies from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. The initial team effort was promising. Mark sent a check for $1,000 labeled Mom Care Fund. Lisa dropped by twice a week with groceries and gossip. But slowly, predictably, the support began to crumble. Mark's second check was $500. The third never came. When I called him, he was full of excuses. "The market's been brutal, sis. I had to move some things around. I'll catch you up next month." He never did. Lisa's visits became less frequent. The groceries she brought were sparse: a carton of milk, a loaf of bread. She'd spend most of her time on the phone in the other room, arguing with her ex-husband or complaining to a friend, before leaving with a dramatic sigh and a "You're a saint for doing this. I could never." The entire burden, financial, physical, and emotional, settled onto my shoulders. Mom's recovery was slow. She needed help with everything: bathing, dressing, getting to her endless doctor's appointments. My freelance work suffered terribly. I had to turn down major projects because I couldn't guarantee uninterrupted hours. My income plummeted. I started dipping into my savings, the nest egg I had carefully built for my own future. The family home, once a place of comfort, started to feel like a prison.
The walls seemed to close in on me. I was no longer a daughter. I was a full-time, unpaid nurse, cook, and cleaning lady. My friends stopped calling, assuming I was too busy. They were right. My world had shrunk into the four walls of that house and the sterile corridors of medical clinics. The resentment began as a low simmer and grew into a raging fire. It was the little things that fueled it. Mark would post pictures on social media of his lavish vacation in Bali while I was using my last $20 to pay for Mom's prescription copay. Lisa would text me asking for $100 to get her car fixed the day after she posted photos of her new designer handbag. They saw my sacrifice not as a gift but as a convenience. It absolved them of all responsibility. I tried to talk to them to explain the strain I was under. "Mark, I can't keep covering all the bills myself," I said during one of our rare phone calls. "Mom's medications are expensive. Utility bills are higher with both of us here." "Just put it on a credit card for now," he said breezily. "I'll get you back, I promise. Things are just tight right now." He was a vice president. I knew he was lying. My conversations with Lisa were even more infuriating. "You're so lucky you get to spend all this time with her," she'd say with a wistful sigh. "I wish I could, but my life is just so chaotic." "My life is chaotic too, Lisa," I'd snap, my patience worn thin. "I haven't had a day off in a year. I haven't seen a friend in months. I'm exhausted." "Oh, don't be so dramatic. You're just at home all day. It can't be that hard." It was the ultimate gaslighting. My reality was denied, my sacrifice reframed as a privilege. The worst part was my mother's role in it. She saw what was happening, but she was too weak or too unwilling to intervene. When I would gently complain that Mark hadn't called in weeks, she would say, "Oh, but he's so busy, dear. His job is very important." When I'd mentioned that Lisa had canceled her visit for the third time in a row, Mom would sigh, "Oh, her children are a handful. We have to understand." She made excuses for them while taking my presence completely for granted. I was the default. I was the one who was supposed to be there. No questions asked. The unfairness of it all gnawed at me, leaving me bitter and perpetually tired. One afternoon, about 2 years into my sentence, I found my mother at the kitchen table staring at a brochure for a Caribbean cruise. Her eyes were bright with a longing that broke my heart. "Wouldn't that be nice, sweetheart, to feel the sun on my face again?" An idea sparked in my mind, a desperate, foolish idea. "Why don't we go?" I said. "Just a short one, a 3-day cruise. It would do you so much good." I knew it was a long shot. I called a family meeting via video chat. I laid out the plan. I had found a cruise line that specialized in accessible travel for seniors. I had crunched the numbers. It was affordable if we all pitched in. Mark's face on the screen was a mask of condescending pity. "Are you serious? You want to take a woman who can barely walk to the bathroom onto a boat in the middle of the ocean? That's incredibly irresponsible." "They have full medical staff. It's perfectly safe," I argued, my voice tight. "And the cost," Lisa chimed in. "I can't afford a cruise. I can barely afford groceries." This from the woman with the new iPhone. "It's not for you, Lisa. It's for Mom. It's what she wants," I pleaded. "What Mom needs," Mark said, his voice dropping into his authoritative corporate tone, "is stability and quiet, not some frivolous trip. Frankly, I'm a little disappointed you'd even suggest something so reckless. Your focus should be on her daily care, not on planning vacations." And just like that, the idea was dead. They made me feel like a foolish child for even dreaming of it. I looked over at my mother. She was quietly folding the brochure, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She wouldn't fight for herself, and she wouldn't fight for me. We were trapped together, in that house, in that life, by the selfish whims of my siblings. That night, for the first time, I cried myself to sleep, not from exhaustion, but from the crushing weight of a loneliness so profound it felt like a physical illness. The team, it was clear, was just me, and I was losing the game. The years crawled by. 3 years became 4, then 5. My life outside the house completely evaporated. I was no longer a graphic designer with a promising future. I was a caregiver. It was my entire identity. Mom's health continued its slow decline. The good days became rarer, the bad days longer. There were more doctor's visits, new medications, a hospital bed installed in the living room. My savings account dwindled to nothing, then went into the red. I was living on credit cards, a mountain of debt growing with each passing month. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. There were dark circles under my eyes that no amount of sleep could erase, and lines of stress etched around my mouth. I was 37, but I felt 60.
The only contact I had with my siblings was when they needed to maintain the illusion of being good children. On Mother's Day, a ridiculously large bouquet of flowers would arrive from Mark, which I would have to arrange and find a vase for. On Mom's birthday, Lisa would bring the kids over for exactly 1 hour, let them run wild through the house, and leave me to clean up the mess. They call Mom and put her on speakerphone, their voices loud and cheerful, asking, "How is our favorite girl doing?" They never asked how I was doing. They didn't want to know. They just needed to tick the "I'm a good son/daughter" box for the week. The breaking point, the moment that planted the seed of the twist I never saw coming, happened on a rainy Tuesday in October. Mom had a particularly bad night. She was confused, agitated, and in pain. I was up with her until 4 a.m., and when I finally fell into an exhausted sleep, the phone rang 2 hours later. It was Mark. "Hey sis, quick question. I need to know the name of Mom's financial advisor," he said, without so much as a hello. "What? Why?" I mumbled, my head thick with sleep. "Just handling some estate planning stuff," he said vaguely, "making sure everything is in order. What's his name?" I gave him the name, not thinking much of it. Estate planning sounded responsible. I was too tired to question it. That was my first mistake. A week later, a thick envelope arrived from a law firm addressed to my mother. I opened it for her, as I did all her mail. It was a revised version of her will. I scanned it quickly. It seemed standard enough. I saw all 3 of our names listed as beneficiaries. I didn't read the fine print. I was too busy trying to get my mother to eat some soup. That was my second and most critical mistake. I placed the document on the desk in the study, and it was forgotten. Life went on, a monotonous cycle of caregiving and exhaustion, but something had started to shift in my mother. She was quieter, more withdrawn. Sometimes I'd find her staring out the window, tears silently tracking down her wrinkled cheeks. "What's wrong, Mom?" I'd ask, stroking her thin hair. She would just shake her head. "I'm just tired, sweetheart. So very tired." I thought she was talking about her physical health. I now know she was talking about the weight on her conscience. Then came the twist. It wasn't a dramatic car crash or a sudden revelation. It was a shoebox. Mom had a stroke in her sleep. It was massive and sudden. One morning she was there, frail but present, and the next she was gone. The silence in the house was deafening. The emptiness was a physical presence, a cold draft that followed me from room to room. Mark and Lisa swooped in, orchestrating the funeral with a chilling efficiency. They were suddenly very present, very involved. They picked out the casket, chose the hymns, and greeted weeping relatives with practiced solemnity. I was in a fog of grief and shock, moving through the days like an automaton. They treated me with a gentle, patronizing kindness that set my teeth on edge. "You just rest. You've done enough," Lisa would say, patting my arm. After the funeral, after the casseroles were eaten and the relatives had gone home, the 3 of us were sitting in the living room. "We need to sort through Mom's things," Mark said, already looking around the room, his eyes calculating the value of the antique furniture. "We should call Mr. Abernathy tomorrow and set up a meeting to read the will." That night, unable to sleep, I wandered the silent house. I ended up in the attic, a place I hadn't been in years. The air was thick with dust and memories. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, I was just remembering. My eyes landed on a stack of old shoeboxes tucked under the eaves. One of them had my mother's handwriting on it. Keepsakes. On a whim, I pulled it down. It wasn't full of old photos or dried corsages. It was full of papers. Bank statements, old letters, and a small leather-bound diary. Curious, I sat down on an old trunk and opened the diary. The first entry was dated 5 years ago, right after I had moved in. "My dear girl is here. She gave up her life for me. Mark and Lisa promised they would help. I hope they do. I don't want to be a burden on her." I smiled through my tears. I kept reading. The entries became more sporadic, more troubled. "Mark called today. He needs another loan. He says his business is in trouble. He promised he'd pay it all back from his bonus. I sent him the money. I hope I did the right thing. I didn't tell my sweet girl. She has enough to worry about." My blood went cold. I flipped to the bank statements. A wire transfer to Mark for $20,000. Then another, a few months later, for $15,000. I kept reading the diary.
"Lisa is in tears again. Her ex-husband is threatening to take the kids. She needs money for a lawyer. She says it's an emergency. I used the money for my retirement account. I had to. She's my daughter. I'll tell my sweet girl later. She wouldn't understand." I found the corresponding withdrawal slip, $10,000. It went on and on. Page after page, statement after statement revealed the horrifying truth. For the past 5 years, while I was downstairs draining my own bank account to buy groceries and pay for medication, my siblings had been systematically draining our mother's life savings. They weren't just neglecting her care, they were actively engaged in financial elder abuse, manipulating her with sob stories and false promises. The total was staggering. Over $150,000. Money that could have paid for a full-time nurse. Money that could have paid for that Caribbean cruise. Money that could have given me my life back. But the final, devastating blow came from the last entry in the diary. It was from about 6 months ago, right after the new will had arrived. Mark and Lisa came to visit today. They took me out to lunch. They are worried about my sweet girl. They say she's under a lot of stress and has been making strange comments about the house. They say she feels entitled to it because she's been living here. They think it's best to protect the family assets to make sure things are fair. They had me sign some new papers with the lawyer. They said it was for the best, to keep the peace. I feel so confused. My head hurts. I hope I'm doing the right thing. And there it was, the entire sickening conspiracy. They hadn't just stolen her money, they had poisoned her against me. They had used my sacrifice as a weapon, twisting it into a narrative of greed. They convinced our ailing mother that the child who was keeping her alive was actually the one trying to rob her. And then they had her sign a will that cut me out completely, securing the house, the only remaining asset, for themselves. I sat there, in the dusty silence of the attic, the shoebox of betrayal in my lap. The grief for my mother was still there, but it was now overshadowed by a white-hot rage so pure and so intense it felt like it could burn the house down. They hadn't just disinherited me, they had orchestrated the most profound betrayal imaginable. I thought back to their gentle, pitying looks after the funeral. "You've done enough," Lisa had said. Oh yes, I had. I had done more than enough, and I was about to do a whole lot more. I carefully packed the diary and the financial statements into my bag. The game had changed. They thought they had won. They had no idea I had just found the rulebook they had been hiding from me all along. We were back in the lawyer's office, the scene from the beginning of my story. Mr. Abernathy had just uttered the words, "This concludes the reading of the will." The air was thick with Mark's smug satisfaction and Lisa's crocodile tears. They were looking at me, expecting me to break down, to cry, to protest impotently. It was the final scene of their perfect play, where the long-suffering martyr finally collapses in defeat. I did not collapse. I took a deep, steadying breath. The rage from the attic had cooled, solidifying into something hard and sharp like a diamond. I looked at Mark. I looked at Lisa. I looked at the memory of the last 5 years of my life, the endless days and sleepless nights, the sacrifices and the solitude. And then I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was all teeth and sharp edges. "Actually, Mr. Abernathy, I don't think we're quite finished here." My voice calm and clear, cutting through the silence. Mark's smirk faltered. Lisa stopped dabbing her eyes. They both stared at me. I reached into my tote bag and pulled out a thick file folder. I placed it on the polished mahogany table with a soft but decisive thud. "What's this?" Mark asked, his voice losing some of his swagger. "This," I said, leaning forward, "is a little light reading. You might call it an addendum to the will. It's a record of the loans and gifts you two solicited from our mother over the past 5 years. While I was changing her bandages, you were draining her bank accounts." I slid a copied bank statement across the table to Mark. It showed the $20,000 wire transfer. "Remember that business trouble you had, Mark? Mom's savings seemed to solve it quite nicely." I slid another piece of paper to Lisa, a copy of a page from Mom's diary. "And Lisa, your endless legal battles with your ex, Mom paid for those too, all while you were telling me you couldn't afford to chip in for her medication." Their faces went from confused to pale to sheet white in a matter of seconds. Mark's jaw was clenched. Lisa looked like she was going to be sick.
"This is ridiculous," Mark sputtered, trying to regain control. "Mom could do whatever she wanted with her money." "She could," I agreed pleasantly. But there's a legal term for systematically manipulating an elderly, infirm woman into giving you over $150,000 while isolating her from her primary caregiver. It's called financial elder abuse. It's a felony. And I have the proof right here. I tapped the folder. Mom's own diary, bank statements, withdrawal slips, a very clear, very ugly picture. Mr. Abernathy, who had been watching this exchange with wide-eyed shock, picked up one of the documents. His professional mask slipped, and he looked genuinely disturbed. The will you had her sign, the one that erases me completely, it was signed under duress and false pretenses, based on lies you told her about me. That's called undue influence. It's grounds to have any will thrown out of court. I leaned back in my chair, enjoying the beautiful, exquisite silence as the full weight of their situation crashed down upon them. They were trapped. Their greed had finally caught up with them. So, I said, it seems we have two options here. Option A, you two are going to sign a document, right now, relinquishing all claim to the estate, the house, its contents, everything. You will sign it over to me as partial repayment for the debt you fraudulently incurred against our mother's assets. In return, I will not take this folder to the district attorney's office and press charges. I will not report you to Adult Protective Services. I will not sue you in civil court for every penny you stole. We will walk out of here, and you will be free, albeit penniless. I let that sink in. Then I delivered the final blow. Option B, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. I walk out of this office with my folder, and your lives as you know them are over. Mark, say goodbye to your big corporate job when your board finds out you're under investigation for felony abuse. Lisa, say hello to a court bottle you really can't afford. The state will freeze the house as an asset in a criminal investigation, so you'll lose it anyway. The choice is yours. Lisa finally broke. She let out a genuine, racking sob. Please, she whispered, looking at me with real fear in her eyes for the first time. Don't do this. Mark just stared at me, his face a thunderous mask of hate. He knew he was beaten. He had built his entire life on an image of success and power, and I was holding the match that could burn it all to the ground. Mr. Abernathy cleared his throat, his voice now firm. The allegations and the evidence presented are of an extremely serious nature, he said, looking at Mark and Lisa. I would strongly advise you to consider the offer on the table. It was over. The fight went out of them completely. Defeated, humiliated, and utterly broken, they signed the papers Mr. Abernathy quickly drafted. I watched the pen tremble in Mark's hand as he signed away the prize he so cruelly schemed for. It was the most satisfying moment of my life. Justice. It wasn't loud or violent. It was quiet. It was the scratch of a pen on paper. It was the beautiful, silent transfer of power. I walked out of that law office and into the sunshine feeling lighter than I had in years. The weight of the house, the resentment, the injustice, it was all gone. I didn't feel triumphant or vengeful. I just felt free. I sold the house. It was full of too many ghosts, too many painful memories. I used the money that was rightfully my mother's legacy, to build a new life, a life that was truly my own. I bought a small, beautiful condo with a balcony overlooking a park. I relaunched my graphic design business, and with the freedom to focus, it flourished beyond my wildest dreams. I reconnected with my old friends. I started traveling the world I had only been able to dream about from the confines of my mother's sick room. I even took that Caribbean cruise, and as I stood on the deck, feeling the sun on my face, I shed the last of my tears for my mother, not for how her life ended, but for the woman she was before my siblings' greed corrupted everything. Mark and Lisa faced their own kind of justice. Word got out in our extended family about what they had done. Mark's perfect life crumbled. He was passed over for a promotion and eventually left his company under a cloud of suspicion. His wife, who had married him for his status, left him when that status evaporated. Lisa had to get a real full-time job for the first time in her life. The drama stopped being a performance and became her grim reality. They both tried to contact me, to apologize. Their apologies were hollow, filled with self-pity for what they had lost, not remorse for what they had done. I listened, and I accepted their apologies, not for them, but for me. Forgiveness, I learned, is not about letting them back into your life. It's about taking the poison out of your own heart so you can finally heal. I wished them peace, but I closed the door firmly and forever. My life now is quiet, happy, and entirely mine. I am no longer a victim, a martyr, or a ghost. I am the architect of my own happiness, built on a foundation of strength I never knew I had. And that's how I found my peace. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself with family members who took you for granted? Share your experience in the comments below. I read them all, and your stories give strength to others. If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of finding your strength. Remember, your peace is worth fighting for, and you are more powerful than you think.